Welcome again from Fort Myers. Jim Bartles here for our Ingstead, Minnesota radio group. And Dick Bremer has become one of our standard guests that we have here in Fort Myers. Dick, we actually got in before you just got in last night as we're recording this on Wednesday.
Yeah, I was a little bit later this year, but we'll be down here for the last couple of weeks, and then we'll leave with the team when they break camp and head up the East Coast. And it's going to be different this year, opening up the regular season in the month of March, but that's where we'll be in Baltimore.
Yeah, and we're on the road for a few days, actually, before we come home for April 5th.
Yeah, 3 in Baltimore with an off day built in there, and then a couple of games in Pittsburgh with an off day in between there. So Twins will be playing 2 other teams' home openers before they play their own at Target Field.
So, Dick, we speak as fellow broadcasters. You, Dick, of course, are a key play-by-play broadcaster for over 30 years with the Minnesota Twins on the TV side, occasionally on the radio side. Me as a back-home broadcaster and fan. But, Dick, let's talk about all the late roster changes that happen. I haven't had this many roster changes affecting what's going to be going north with the club in a long time.
It's been a different off season across Major League Baseball, and you know, we used to talk, Jim, about a team winning the month of January when they would bring in, you know, free agents and all that. Well, it's different this year, and I think the consensus throughout baseball is that the Twins may have won the month of March. Now, none of that matters once you start playing the games for real, but this has been a really interesting, to say the least, month of March for the Twins, with a couple of starting pitchers and a slugging first baseman DH type, Logan Morrison, coming over. So I think it's done nothing but really fuel the fire for Twins fans back home.
Absolutely, and strengthen that pitching depth on our starting pitching. Let's talk about the bullpen additions that were made during the regular part of the offseason. That really helped the Twins.
Yeah, you know, this team won 85 ball games last year, and they did it with some shortcomings in the pitching side, we'll put it that way, particularly in the starting rotation. But they decided to really beef up the rotation, or excuse me, the bullpen in the winter months because they realize that this has become part of the game now, where teams succeed or fail with the success of their relievers, and they felt that was an area of concern. They addressed that first, then the rotation. So we're hopeful that the pitching staff as a whole is going to be a lot better than it was last year.
It looks like the long reliever position may be a little bit up for grabs, although perhaps Phil Hughes could be heading that way. Tyler Duffy may be a chance at that as well. What about this Rule 5 Kinley? He's showed some things that they like, and of course you either got to use him, keep him, or lose him.
Yeah, I think it's going to be with the additions made. With Jake Odorizzi and with Lance Lynn coming over, that'll have an impact on the bullpen, because the Twins like Phil Hughes, certainly. They like Tyler Duffy, and it'll, I would think, be very difficult for the Twins to keep any Rule 5 pitchers because of that. You like to have depth. It doesn't mean that he can't stay in the organization. The Twins could make an arrangement to keep him in the organization. They like his arm, but I would think the additions to the starting rotation here once camp has started could potentially impact the relievers as well.
Kinley with a lot of velocity in his pitching, and yes, maybe a trade could be arranged that they can still keep him. Backup catcher, appears that Garver would be the person. We lost Jimenez, who did a good role for us as a backup catcher and also in the clubhouse, but Garver appears to be the guy.
And I think, to be fair to Mitch, I don't know that he has much of anything to prove at AAA. He had a really good year last year at AAA and developed as a really good catcher. He improved his receiving skills, and I think the thought all along was he can learn a lot from Jason Castro as a backup for the next year or two, in the hopes that he might be, you know, the #1 catcher down the road.
We'll take a short break here for our first segment of our interview with Dick Bremer. Dick, of course, a Minnesota native, our play-by-play broadcaster for the Minnesota Twins on the TV side. Your grade on Paul Molitor. Last year certainly was well. He's gone through a few years with ups and downs. How are you grading Paul Molitor and the coaching team?
Well, I think you have to look at Paul's 3-year tenure as manager of the Twins and understand in his first year and again last year, they overachieved. And I think it gives a little more ammunition to the argument that in 2016, it was just an awful year. You know, they lost their first 9 games. And I know it's a long baseball season, but realistically, you can't recover from that. And they lost a lot of 3-1, 4-2 ball games that could have gone either way. So, you know, rather than look at Paul's year last year, even though he was manager of the year, let's look at the body of work through 3 years. And in 2 of the 3 years, I think everyone would agree that he probably helped the team overachieve. And so now it's a little bit different situation for him moving forward. This team now, for the first time in a long time, is expected to win. They're expected now to challenge the Indians for a division championship, and we'll see where it goes. But I know Paul's really enthused with what he's seen so far here in Canada. And
of course, on the positive side, last year we became sellers after the All-Star break and still made the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think that probably is what earned Paul the Manager of the Year award last year, because the team kind of pivoted, as they said, you know, in rather short order toward the end of July, and sold off some pieces. So I really think that what they did in August and September and got into the postseason, that's probably the biggest feather in Paul's cap.
Stay with us. Dick Bremer is with us, our guest here at Fort Myers. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the prospects, as we like to do every year. What's in that minor league system? Also about Brian Dozier's contract, what might be happening, and a couple other things. This is your Spring Training Report.